The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of the elegant restaurant, casting golden streaks across the polished marble floors. The Garden Terrace was the kind of place where business deals were sealed and celebrations were held, where crystal glasses caught the light and conversations were spoken in hushed, respectful tones. But today, the quiet dignity of this upscale establishment would be shattered by a scene that would leave every witness questioning the very nature of family, respect, and human decency. At a corner table near the large windows sat an elderly man, his weathered hands folded carefully in his lap as he waited. His name was Harold Thompson, though most people who knew him simply called him Harry. At 73, his once broad shoulders had begun to curve slightly with age, and his thick gray hair was combed neatly to one side. His clothes, though clean and pressed, showed their years. The dark blue suit jacket had faded slightly at the elbows, and his leather shoes, polished to a shine, bore the scuffs of countless walks and countless memories. Harry had been waiting for nearly an hour, checking his old pocket watch every few minutes with the nervous energy of someone who desperately wanted everything to go perfectly. Today was supposed to be special. Today, he was finally going to meet Rebecca, the woman his son Michael had been telling him about for months, the woman Michael planned to marry, the woman who might soon become part of their small family. Harry's eyes lit up with anticipation every time the restaurant door opened, hoping to see his son's familiar face. Michael had promised to bring Rebecca for lunch, to introduce her properly to the father who had raised him alone after his mother passed away when Michael was just 12 years old. Those had been difficult years, filled with struggle and sacrifice, but Harry had worked 2 jobs to ensure his son never went without. He had attended every school play, every basketball game, every graduation ceremony, beaming with pride at the man his boy had become. Now Michael was a successful lawyer, living in the city, driving expensive cars and wearing suits that cost more than Harry's monthly pension. But despite the distance that success had created between them, Harry held on to the hope that family bonds could bridge any gap. He believed that love and respect were values that transcended social status or bank account balances. The sound of heels clicking across the marble floor drew Harry's attention. A young woman approached his table, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves, her designer dress hugging her slender frame like it had been crafted specifically for myrrh. Her jewelry caught the light with each step, and her makeup was applied with professional precision. This was Rebecca Martinez, though she had long ago abandoned the humble surname of her childhood in favor of something that sounded more sophisticated to her ears. Rebecca's eyes swept over Harry with the kind of assessment that judges a person's worth in seconds. She saw the faded suit, the weathered hands, the nervous smile of an old man trying too hard to make a good impression. Her perfectly painted lips curved into something that might have been mistaken for a smile, if not for the coldness behind her eyes. "You must be Harold," she said, her voice carrying the practiced sweetness of someone who had learned to mask their true feelings. She did not extend her hand in greeting, nor did she wait for him to stand, as his generation had been taught was proper when a lady approached. Harry rose anyway, his movements careful and deliberate. "Please, call me Harry, and you must be Rebecca. Michael has told me so much about you. I'm so happy to finally meet the woman who has captured my son's heart." His voice carried genuine warmth, the kind of warmth that comes from a lifetime of loving without reservation. Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. She had been expecting someone different, someone who matched the success of her fiancé. Instead, she found herself face to face with a reminder of humble beginnings, of a past that didn't fit into the carefully constructed image of her future. She slid into the chair across from him without waiting for assistance, her movements sharp and impatient. "Michael is running late," she announced, checking her phone with exaggerated annoyance. "Some emergency at the firm. You know how important his work is." The emphasis on important was subtle but unmistakable, a gentle reminder of the distance between Michael's professional world and whatever world this old man inhabited. A waiter approached their table, his posture professional and attentive. Good afternoon. My name is James, and I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Rebecca looked at the waiter as if he had interrupted something important. "I'll have a glass of your best champagne, the Dom Perignon, if you have it. He'll have water." She did not look at Harry when she added, "He'll have water." Harry's smile wavered slightly. He had been hoping to order something modest but pleasant, perhaps a cup of coffee or a soft drink. But he didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to embarrass Rebecca or create conflict before he'd even had a chance to know her. Water would be fine, he agreed, quietly. As the waiter walked away, Rebecca pulled out her phone and began scrolling through messages, her attention completely absorbed by the glowing screen. Harry sat in silence, unsure whether he should attempt conversation or wait for her to finish. The minutes ticked by, marked only by the soft sounds of other diners and the gentle clink of silverware against china.
Finally, Harry cleared his throat gently. "Rebecca, I hope you know how grateful I am that Michael found someone like you. He's been alone for so long, focused entirely on his career. It makes an old father's heart happy to know he has someone special in his life." Rebecca looked up from a phone with barely concealed irritation. "Someone like me?" she repeated, her voice sharp with challenge. "And what exactly do you think I'm like, Harold?" The use of his formal name felt like a slap. Harry shifted uncomfortably in his chair, sensing that he had somehow misstepped without understanding how. "I just meant someone successful, intelligent, beautiful, someone who makes him happy." "Successful," Rebecca repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, I suppose I am successful. I have my own business, my own money, my own life. I don't need anyone to take care of me, if that's what you're implying." Harry raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I wasn't implying anything negative. I think it's wonderful that you're independent. Michael always admired strong women. His mother was the same way." At the mention of Michael's mother, Rebecca's expression hardened further. She had heard the stories, of course, the saint-like woman who had died young, leaving behind a grieving husband and son. The perfect mother whose memory cast a shadow over every woman who entered Michael's life. Rebecca had no intention of competing with a ghost, and she certainly had no interest in pretending to care about the sentimental reminiscences of the man who kept that ghost's memory alive. "I'm sure she was lovely," she said in a tone that suggested the exact opposite. "But that was a long time ago, wasn't it? People move on, lives change, standards evolve." The words hit Harry like physical blows. He had spent 25 years honoring his wife's memory while raising his son to be a good man. The suggestion that this was somehow outdated or irrelevant felt like an attack on everything he held sacred. Before Harry could respond, the waiter returned with their drinks. He placed the champagne flute in front of Rebecca with a flourish and set a simple glass of water beside Harry's place setting. Rebecca lifted her glass in a mock toast. "To new beginnings," she said, her smile sharp as a blade. Harry lifted his water glass with a trembling hand. "To family," he replied, hoping to find some common ground. Rebecca's laugh was like breaking glass. "Family," she repeated. "Yes, let's talk about family. Let's talk about the kind of family Michael is going to have now that he's with me." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than if she had shouted. "You see, Harold, Michael and I have been discussing our future, our plans, our goals, and frankly, Those plans don't include clinging to the past or being weighed down by obligations to people who can't keep up with the life we're building together." Harry felt the room spinning slightly around him. "I don't understand what you're saying, Rebecca." "I think you understand perfectly." Her voice was cold now, all pretense of politeness abandoned. "Michael is going to be a partner in his firm soon. We'll be moving in circles where appearance matters, where connections are everything, where the people you associate with reflect on your own status and success." She gestured dismissively in his direction. "Look at yourself, Harold. Look at this suit you're wearing, these shoes, this watch that probably came from a department store decades ago. Do you honestly think you fit into the world Michael is entering? Do you think having you around helps his image or hurts it?" The cruelty of her words was breathtaking. Harry had faced hardship before, had endured loss and struggle and disappointment, but nothing had prepared him for this level of calculated meanness from someone he had hoped to welcome into his family. "Rebecca, please," he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. "I'm his father. I raised him. I love him." "Love," she spoke the word like it was something distasteful. "How romantic, how quaint. But love doesn't pay for the kind of wedding we're planning. Love doesn't open doors in the legal community. Love doesn't buy houses in the right neighborhoods or memberships to the right clubs." She pulled out her phone again and showed him a picture of an enormous diamond ring. "This ring cost more than you probably made in 5 years. Our wedding is going to cost more than your house is worth. The honeymoon we're planning will take us to places you've probably never even heard of." Harry stared at the phone screen, overwhelmed by the casual cruelty of her words. "I'm happy that Michael can give you those things. I'm proud that he's successful." "Are you? Or are you jealous, resentful that your son has grown beyond the small, limited world you provided for him?" "I'm proud," Harry insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. The attack had been so sudden, so vicious, that he felt like he was drowning. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, studying him with detached interest, like a scientist examining an insect. "You know what I think, Harold? I think you're a burden. I think you represent everything Michael is trying to leave behind. The struggling single father, the blue-collar background, the constant reminders of a life that wasn't quite good enough." She took another sip of her champagne, savoring both the taste and the pain she was inflicting. "You know, Michael and I have discussed this, you know. We've talked about how to handle the situation, how to manage the expectations of certain family members who might not understand their place in our new life." Harry felt the room spinning slightly around him. "What are you saying, Rebecca?" "I'm saying that after we're married, things are going to be different. Very different. Michael won't have time for weekly phone calls, or monthly visits, or holiday traditions that don't align with our social calendar. He'll have new priorities, new responsibilities, new loyalties." The restaurant around them continued to buzz with quiet conversation, but Harry felt isolated in a bubble of humiliation and heartbreak. Other diners glanced occasionally in their direction, perhaps sensing the tension, but unable to hear the quiet devastation being delivered with surgical precision. "Rebecca, please listen to me," Harry said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want anything from Michael that he doesn't want to give. I don't need expensive gifts or fancy vacations or even regular visits. I just want to remain part of his life. I want to be his father."
"His father?" Rebecca repeated, as if the concept were foreign to her. "Yes, biologically speaking, that's accurate. But being someone's father and being welcome in their life are two entirely different things." She reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet, extracting several crisp $100 bills and placing them on the table between them. This should cover lunch and a taxi home. I think we understand each other now." Harry stared at the money as if it were something toxic. "I don't want your money, Rebecca." "It's not my money," she corrected him with a cruel smile. "It's Michael's money. Money he earned, money he's entitled to spend however he chooses. And he's chosen to spend it on making this conversation as brief and final as possible." The implication hit Harry like a physical blow. Michael knows about this conversation? Rebecca's smile widened. "Who do you think suggested we meet alone first? Who do you think wanted me to explain the new reality to you before he had to do it himself? Michael loves you, Harold, but he loves his future more. And I am his future." Harry felt tears gathering in his eyes, but he fought them back. He would not give her the satisfaction of seeing him completely broken. "I don't believe you," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "My son wouldn't do this. He wouldn't send someone else to push his father away." Rebecca pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages until she found what she was looking for. She turned the screen toward Harry, showing him a text conversation between her and Michael. "Make it clear, but gentle. He needs to understand that things are going to be different now. I can't keep being responsible for his emotional needs." Another message appeared below it. "I know it sounds harsh, but Rebecca's right. I need to focus on building our life together, not managing expectations from the past." Harry stared at the messages, each word cutting deeper than the last. His son's words, his son's decision, delivered through the perfectly manicured hands of a woman who seemed to take pleasure in his pain. "You see," Rebecca said, sliding the phone back into her purse, "this isn't me being cruel, Harold. This is me being honest about what your son wants but doesn't have the courage to tell you himself." The elderly man sat in stunned silence, processing the reality of what was happening. The son he had raised, the boy he had sacrificed everything for, had not only abandoned him, but had deputized his fiancée to deliver the devastating news. "I think our conversation is finished," Rebecca announced, standing up and smoothing her dress. "The money on the table should cover your meal and transportation. I trust you'll find your own way home." She turned to leave, then paused and looked back at him one final time. "And, oh, Harold, when Michael calls you next week to check in, please don't make this difficult for him. Don't mention our conversation. Don't create drama. Just let him believe that you understand and accept the new arrangements. It will be easier for everyone that way." With that, she walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the same confident rhythm that had announced her arrival. Harry watched her go, this woman who had just systematically destroyed his relationship with his son, and seemed proud of her efficiency. The restaurant continued its quiet hum around him. Other diners focused on their own conversations, their own lives, their own relationships. None of them knew that a family had just been shattered at the table by the window, that a father's heart had been broken with surgical precision by someone who was about to become his daughter-in-law. Harry sat alone at the table, staring at the money Rebecca had left behind. The bills seemed to mock him, a final insult in a conversation filled with cruelty. He thought about all the years he had worked extra shifts to pay for Michael's college, all the nights he had stayed up helping with homework, all the dreams he had harbored about growing old with his son nearby, watching grandchildren grow up, being part of a continuing family story. All of it had been reduced to a few $100s on a restaurant table and a text message conversation between his son and a woman who saw him as nothing more than an obstacle to be managed. The worst part wasn't Rebecca's cruelty, though that had been breathtaking in its precision. The worst part was the growing certainty that she had been telling the truth about Michael's involvement. Harry knew his son well enough to recognize his voice in those text messages, his tendency to avoid difficult conversations, his desire to maintain peace at any cost. As the afternoon light began to fade outside the restaurant windows, Harry Thompson sat alone at his table, wondering if the son he had raised with such love and dedication would ever walk through that door to stand by his side again. He wondered if family bonds were strong enough to survive the kind of systematic destruction he had just witnessed, or if some betrayals cut too deep to ever fully heal. The story of Harold Thompson was far from over, but this chapter had ended in a way that would haunt him for days to come. The question now was whether love could triumph over ambition, whether blood truly ran thicker than the promise of social advancement, and whether a son would choose his father over the woman who seemed determined to erase that father from their lives entirely. As Harry sat in the growing twilight, clutching his old pocket watch and staring at the money that represented his son's attempt to buy his silence and compliance, he had no way of knowing that this painful afternoon was only the beginning of a story that would test every assumption about family, loyalty, and the price of success.
The evening shadows stretched across the restaurant floor when the familiar sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the dining room. Michael Thompson burst through the entrance, his expensive suit wrinkled from rushing, his face flushed with worry and confusion. He had received a strange call from the restaurant manager about his father, still sitting alone at their reserved table hours after his scheduled lunch. Michael's eyes swept the nearly empty dining room until they found the solitary figure by the window. Harry sat motionless, the untouched glass of water still in front of him, the crisp $100 bills Rebecca had left scattered across the white tablecloth like accusations. "Dad?" Michael approached cautiously, his voice filled with genuine concern. "What are you doing here? Where's Rebecca? Didn't you two have lunch together?" Harry looked up at his son with eyes that seemed to have aged years in the span of a single afternoon. The joy and anticipation that had filled his face earlier had been replaced by something Michael had never seen before, a deep, wounded understanding that cut straight to the soul. "She was here," Harry said quietly, his voice hoarse from hours of silent contemplation. "We had quite a conversation." Michael slid into the chair across from his father, the same chair Rebecca had occupied hours earlier. "I'm sorry I'm so late. The Patterson case exploded and I couldn't get away. I tried calling Rebecca, but her phone went straight to voicemail." He paused, studying his father's expression with growing alarm. "Dad, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." Harry's weathered hands trembled slightly as he reached across the table and pushed the scattered bills toward his son. "She left these for me, said they were from you, payment for a taxi home and my silence." Michael stared at the money, confusion clouding his features. "I don't understand. Payment for what?" "For accepting my new place in your life. For understanding that your future doesn't include room for an embarrassing old man who doesn't fit into the world you're building." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. He leaned back in his chair, his face pale with shock and dawning realization. "Dad, what exactly did Rebecca say to you?" Harry met his son's eyes for the first time since he'd arrived. "She showed me the text messages, Michael, the ones where you told her to make things clear but gentle, where you said you couldn't keep being responsible for my emotional needs." Michael's expression shifted from confusion to horror as the implications of his father's words sank in. "What text messages? Dad, I never sent any messages about you. I would never—" He stopped mid-sentence, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. As Michael scrolled through his messages, his face grew darker with each passing second. He found the conversation thread with Rebecca, but the messages his father had seen weren't there. In their place were different messages entirely. Messages about restaurant reservations and wedding planning details. "These aren't my messages," he said, tight with controlled anger. "Dad, whatever she showed you, whatever she said, none of it was real. Someone created fake messages to make you think I wanted to push you away." Harry searched his son's face, looking for any sign of deception, any hint that this was another layer of the cruel game he had endured. But what he saw was genuine shock and growing fury, emotions that couldn't be faked. "But she knew things," Harry said, his voice cracking with the strain of hope fighting against despair. "About your partnership? About your wedding plans? About wanting to move in different circles?" Michael's jaw tightened as understanding dawned. "She's been pushing me for months to limit contact with you. Always subtle suggestions about how busy I was, how you probably didn't want to burden me with visits. I thought she was being considerate." His hands clenched into fists on the table. "I can't believe I was so blind." The elderly man felt tears gathering in his eyes, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of relief, mixed with lingering pain. "So, you don't want me out of your life?" "Dad, no! Never!" Michael reached across the table and grasped his father's trembling hands. "You're the most important person in my world. Everything I am, everything I've accomplished, it's because you sacrificed everything to raise me. How could you think I would throw that away?" Harry squeezed his son's hands, feeling warmth return to fingers that had been cold for despair for hours. "She was very convincing, son, very detailed about how I was holding you back, how my presence would hurt your career." Michael's face hardened with a determination Harry hadn't seen since his son was a teenager, standing up to schoolyard bullies. "Where is she now?" "She left hours ago, said she had done what needed to be done." Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "I need to find her. This ends tonight."
"Michael, wait!" Harry called, struggling to his feet. "Maybe we should think about this. If she's willing to go this far, what else might she do?" But Michael was already walking toward the exit, his phone pressed to his ear. Harry could hear fragments of the angry conversation as his son left voicemail after voicemail for Rebecca, each one more demanding than the last. 20 minutes later, Rebecca walked back into the restaurant, with the confident stride of someone who believed she had won a decisive victory. Her smile faded instantly when she saw both men standing by the table, Michael's face dark with barely controlled rage. "Michael, darling," she purred, trying to regain her composure. "I thought you were still at the office. Your father and I had a lovely conversation. I think we understand each other perfectly now." "Oh, we understand each other," Michael replied, his voice deadly quiet, "but not in the way you think." Rebecca's eyes flicked between father and son, and for the first time since Harry had met her, he saw uncertainty creep across her perfect features. "You created fake text messages. You manipulated and lied to try to drive a wedge between my father and me. You spent the afternoon psychologically torturing a 73-year-old man whose only crime was wanting to welcome you into his family." Rebecca's mask finally slipped completely. "He doesn't belong in our world, Michael. Surely you can see that. I was protecting our future." "Our future?" Michael's laugh was bitter. "There is no our future. There never was, apparently, because the woman I thought I loved would never treat my father the way you treated him today." Michael pulled the engagement ring box from his jacket pocket and set it on the table between them. "This relationship is over, Rebecca, completely and permanently." Rebecca stared at the ring box as if it were a snake. You're making a mistake, Michael. You're choosing him over everything we could have together. I'm choosing decency over ambition. I'm choosing love over status. And yes, I'm choosing my father over someone who could be cruel to an elderly man for sport." As Rebecca stormed out of the restaurant for the final time, her heels clicking an angry rhythm against the marble floor, Michael turned back to his father. Harry stood quietly, overwhelmed by the swift reversal of his fortune, but afraid to believe it was real. "Dad," Michael said, his voice gentle now, "I owe you the biggest apology of my life. I should have seen what she was doing. I should have protected you." Harry smiled through his tears, the first genuine smile he had managed all day. "You're here now, son. That's what matters." Michael pulled his father into a tight embrace, both men holding on as if afraid the other might disappear. "From now on, no one comes between us. Family first, always." As they walked out of the restaurant together, Harry felt lighter than he had in months. The cruel afternoon had nearly broken his heart, but it had also revealed the true strength of the bond between father and son. Some relationships could survive any test, withstand any attack, and emerge stronger on the other side. The story that had begun with humiliation and heartbreak ended with redemption and renewed love. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most painful experiences, and sometimes it takes almost losing something precious to understand its true value. Michael Thompson had learned that success meant nothing without the people you loved by your side. And Harry Thompson had learned that the son he raised with such devotion would always choose love over convenience, family over status, and truth over comfortable lies. Their bond had been tested by cruelty and emerged unbreakable,